Welcome to the Boomer Buzz, the show that focuses on issues of interest to the 60 and over crowd, both here on Long Island and across the country. Listen as experts keep you informed about the latest health solutions, financial options, and lifestyle choices, both for senior citizens and their families. Now, here are the hosts of the Boomer Buzz, Dr. Lamar Stanford and Patricia Stanford, corporate wellness consultant, on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Welcome to the Boomer Buzz, where each week we'll give you the buzz on how to stay healthy, wealthy, and wise after the age of 60.
Today our topic is hearing loss as we age, and our expert is Dr. Jennifer Ledbetter. She's an audiologist from Ledbetter Audiology in Bellmore, New York. Welcome to the show, Dr. Ledbetter.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, we're thrilled. I've heard that about a third of adults over the age of 65 and half of those older than 85 have some hearing problems. It's the third most common chronic disease among older adults.
That's correct.
Has that been your experience?
It has been, yes.
Okay, so hearing loss, from what I can tell with the people that I know, and being around the elderly, is more than an inconvenience. It can lead to depression, withdrawal, anger, loss of self-esteem, and overall unhappiness with life. So,
it can, yes.
That being said, what do you think is something that impacts people with hearing loss that you've come into contact with?
The biggest issue that people are having is not being able to communicate with their loved ones. So they'll say, I can't understand my spouse, or I can't hear what my grandchildren are saying. And that makes it very hard for them to be part of conversations, parties, even everyday conversations with anybody. Okay.
That's a tough one.
Now, have you seen in your practice any people who have, depression? Is that a common problem with loss of hearing?
It can be because the person that's got the hearing loss winds up feeling that they're isolated because nobody understands them. They feel like they can't have a conversation with someone without having to have them repeat themselves several times. So then they start to feel like they're a burden on their family or their friends, so they just don't partake in conversations, and that leads to them having their own little social isolation where they can't communicate with people. So it can be very depressing.
I was thinking of women in particular. Women don't like to appear to age, and so do you think that's a problem with females coming in and saying, "Listen, I need a hearing aid. Gee, and I'll look old." Is that an issue?
Everybody's got different reasons why they want to come in or don't want to come in. So a lot of times the women will complain more because they're a little bit more social. So they have trouble if they go to a quilting club or if they're playing cards with their friends and they can't hear the conversation. Whereas men, most reasons that they come in for is because their spouse or significant other tells them that they're not listening to them. So they kind of come in to prove a point to say, yes, I can or I can't hear. So it's a little different reasonings.
Sure. Now, what are some of the signs and symptoms of hearing loss? Somebody might say, well, that's obvious, they can't hear you, but...
Right. Usually people will come in and say, again, they can't hear certain people having conversations. They don't hear well in groups or in noise. They'll not be able to carry on a full conversation without having to have people repeat themselves. So... little things. It could be like, I don't hear the ding on the microwave. I don't hear my blinker in the car. Simple things that we take for granted, and a lot of times people don't know what they don't hear until someone else points it out to them.
And is it usually a spouse that brings them in and says, listen, you got to do something with this husband of mine?
Yes, it actually does become almost like relationship counseling, because the person that's hearing impaired doesn't always know that other person is talking to them. So the other side of the party says, I ask him something 12 times and he doesn't answer me, and then the one that doesn't hear says, well, why are you yelling at me for 12 times? So it's not necessarily a comfortable situation, and you kind of have to rely on the other situations in there, like, why is he not hearing you? Why are you not responding? Why are you yelling at him? So it's hard.
Now, one of the things associated with hearing loss is loss of balance also. It all takes place in that inner ear. And has that been your experience also?
You can have a correlation between balance issues and hearing loss. There are some specific forms of balance disorder that are associated with hearing loss, something like Meniere's disease, where you have a bit of a hearing loss that fluctuates, that gives you ringing in your ears and gives you balance issues. But majority of patients that I've seen that have hearing issues don't necessarily have the balance issues that are correlated with the hearing loss. Okay. They could have balance issues just because they're an older population who has a tendency to have fall and balance issues. Now,
there's a word, tinnitus or tinnitus. How do you pronounce that?
I usually say tinnitus.
Tinnitus.
But either pronunciation is correct.
How does that, is that the precursor to more hearing loss?
Not necessarily, because not everyone that has hearing loss has tinnitus, and not everyone with tinnitus has hearing loss. So you can have them both kind of work together, and some people will notice as their hearing gets worse that their tinnitus gets worse. But other things can also impact the degree of tinnitus people have.
Now, we noticed that there was tinnitus may also be a symptom of an unrelated condition requiring medical attention. Can
Correct.
You maybe help us with that?
Yep. Tinnitus can go along with, first of all, from my understanding, there is no cure for tinnitus. So the first step is to find out where it's coming from. Is it related to the hearing loss, or is it related to medications that a patient is taking? There have been studies that show that as your blood pressure or cardiac issues are more involved, that tinnitus may become more of a prominent factor in your medical care. So it definitely can be something that you should look at. Everybody experiences some degree of tinnitus for a couple seconds, and if it goes away, spectacular. It's when it's a more constant presence that becomes bothersome to you that it's more of an issue.
We should also say that tinnitus is a ringing in the ear. I don't know if we've said that before.
It's actually, it doesn't even have to be just a specific ringing. I have patients where it's a humming or a buzzing. It's just really your ear hearing something that's not being produced by an external source. So you can hear a ringing. I have patients that'll say it sounds like static on a radio. It can sound like the steam from a radiator. Different things. Some people actually hear music. So you can have different things. It's not always just a ringing.
Okay.
Now, maybe I can interrupt. We need to take a break at this point in time. You're listening to the Boomer Buzz on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Dr. Lamar Stanford, along with my wife, Patricia Stanford, who's a corporate wellness consultant. And our guest today is Dr. Jennifer Ledbetter, talking about hearing loss in the boomer population. Next question, if you don't mind. How do you tell a loved one that they have a problem with hearing loss?
That's a very tricky question. I would, in most of my experiences, the only way, or the majority of people that will come in will have to notice themselves that they're having a problem. So even if you're expressing as a family member or a friend, if you express to them that they may be missing some things, that's a gentle way just to kind of bring them into the topic of how are they hearing. But the person themselves has to admit that they are having trouble. Otherwise, their expectations for any kind of treatment or rehabilitation is a little bit worse.
Okay.
So Dr. Ledbetter, what are the things that can be helpful for those experiencing hearing loss? We know about the basics, like hearing aids, but are there other things that people can do other than hearing aids?
Yeah, there are plenty of other things that people could do. Hearing aids can be very expensive, and most of the time insurance doesn't cover them. So people may be in the situation where they want to help a loved one or even help themselves to hear better. There are things called assistive listening devices, things like like a pocket talker, which looks like a little transistor radio, so that it has a microphone on it. The patient then wears earphones or an earbud, and that can make things louder. There are telephones that are either amplified telephones, if that's what the big issue is. There's amplified telephones. There are telephones that have captioning, so you could read the captions on the phones. Any kind of listening devices that are alerting, because if you have a hearing loss, you want to make sure that the person's safe in the house. So if a doorbell rings or if a phone goes off or an alarm goes off, there may be, another indicator, a light or something to let them know that things are going on. And even just the captioning on the television. If they're having trouble listening to certain programs on the television, use the caption on the television as an option. People go to Broadway shows. People go to museums. They have a wireless listening device. So you're hooked into the sound system of that facility. You don't have to have your own hearing aids. You can put on their device. It's wirelessly sent from their sound system directly to your ears. And the places can provide that to you at no cost.
Oh, that's great. Mm-hmm. And then what about hearing aids? So they would come to a doctor that specializes in hearing, and an audiologist, and then what happens? What's that process like?
First thing we would do is make sure that there's no reason, simple things like wax in their ears or any kind of fluid in their ears, any kind of ear infection. So we do that by looking in their ears first. Then we would do a hearing test to determine what their hearing thresholds are in both ears. Part of the test is repeating words back to us to make sure, even if I make the sounds louder, are they clear or are they distorted? That kind of also helps us to know if hearing aids are appropriate or not appropriate for a patient. And then we usually have a conversation of what the patient feels their issues are. Where are they having trouble? What do they want to hear with hearing aids? What are they not hearing without hearing aids? And we kind of start from that step.
Okay, but not everyone benefits from a hearing aid?
Not everyone benefits from hearing aids. It also depends on the degree of hearing loss the patient has. It can also depend on what we call a discrimination score. So if I give you a list of 25 words at a comfortable level and you only get 2 of those words correct, a hearing aid isn't going to help you hear conversation clearly. If anything, it may just bring more background noise to you. So then we would have to look into other options for helping out in that situation.
Okay, what about people with hearing aids that don't use them?
That's the bad thing. Mm-hmm. We have to figure out why people don't use their hearing aids. If it's a stigma because they feel like they don't want to look like they're missing anything. I don't want people to think that I'm not hearing well, that I'm ignoring them. Is it because they don't fit in their ears well? Is it because they can't handle them? Is it not properly tuned for them? So we really need to find out why people don't wear their hearing aids.
Just a question, why do hearing aids cost so much?
The big part of the hearing aids comes into the research that the manufacturers do on them. So before hearing aids put out to the public, they probably do years and years of research looking at what the technology that's in there, making it as small as possible, because no one's ever asked me for a big hearing aid. They want to have the smallest thing that does the most amount of things. Can you connect it to my phone? Can you connect it to my Bluetooth? Can you work my television with it? So the big part is, how do they get the best sound in the smallest device that's appropriate for hearing?
Okay, that's terrific. This is probably a good time for us to take another break. I'm Patricia Stanford, corporate wellness consultant, along with my husband, Dr. Lamar Stanford, and our guest today is Dr. Jennifer Ledbetter, talking about hearing loss in the boomer population. You're listening to the Boomer Buzz on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
If your skin could talk, would you listen?
As your skin, I forgive you. I forgive you for poking and popping me when I broke out at 14. I forgive you for that awful belly ring hole you left in me when you were 15. I forgive you for damaging me before prom, on spring break, and at tanning salons when you were 16, 17, 18. But I'm your skin, and if you continue to tan, I hope you can forgive me Forgive me when wrinkles begin to show and I start developing age spots. Forgive me if I develop melanoma when you're only 22. So please, I'm asking you to stop. Stop tanning now. Our future depends on it.
Protect your skin from melanoma, the second most common cancer in young women 15 to 29 years old. And protect your future. Learn more at spotskincancer.org. A message from the American Academy of Dermatology.
Welcome back to the Boomer Buzz on the voice of NASA Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Dr. Lamar Stanford and my wife Patricia Stanford. And our guest today is Dr. Jennifer Ledbetter. She's a professional audiologist, has her own practice in Bellmore, New York. And we're talking about hearing loss in the boomer population. Maybe I can start off with another question here. Some of our listeners have serious concerns about the cost of these devices. I've seen them as high as $5,000, some as low as $1,500, but that's still a pricey amount to have to pay as a senior.
They are. They can be expensive, yeah.
Anything that they can do to mitigate that cost?
The biggest thing that I would look for is, thankfully, some of the insurance companies are giving patients benefits for hearing aid devices, which is a wonderful asset because there are so many people that are affected by hearing loss, and it's a shame to not be able to hear just because you think you can't afford to do hearing aids. There are always options in terms of if you go and you see your audiologist, definitely mention what your pricing is. What are you able to afford? The audiologist should be able to work something out for you. Even if it's something, there are different populations that we look for donated hearing aids because there are a lot of people that can't afford any type of hearing aids paying out of their own pocket. So there are foundations that will cover them if you have a financial need for them. My biggest concern is really just having people ask the audiologist, ask them what they're able to do for them. Maybe there are different types of hearing aids that they can use that are less expensive. If they can finance the hearing aids, if they have a payment plan for hearing aids. Just really to get them into a pair of hearing aids so that they can hear better and not worry about having to pay $1 million for them.
One question. Do you have a particular hearing aid that you think has got the best bang for the bucks? In other words, it's not a $5,000, it's not a $1,000, it's something in there that you found over the years really is a good bargain and it provides good coverage for most people.
The different pricing, at least in my practice, the different pricing depends on the different circuits that are in the hearing aids. So there's usually like an entry-level pair of hearing aids all the way up to a high-tech hearing aid. And we really just have to look at that. There's not a one-size-fits-all, so it depends first on what the person's hearing loss is, and then what they're expecting of the hearing aids. So obviously something that's going to be a little bit more expensive is for someone that's in a lot of different environments. So if you want the hearing aid to be very responsive to changes in environments, you're going to look for a faster circuit. That faster circuit correlates to a higher price of hearing aids. On the flip side, if you are a person or if the person that you're fitting, their only interaction with people is sitting at a dinner table with 50 other people in, like an independent living, where you're sitting in a dining room and the only conversation you have is going to be that mealtime, you also want to have something that's going to do the best. You want to pull out the speech from that background noise, and that's really where they start to differentiate themselves. So the entry level has a certain degree of speech cleanup, if you want to put it that way. The higher end is a little bit more aggressive in how it processes speech and noise. So it really depends on what your environments are and what you expect out of the hearing aids.
How long does a hearing aid normally last a person? How often do you think they have to upgrade?
They should last about 4 to 6 years.
Okay. And
I'm just wondering, what kind of changes have you seen in your patients' lives after they've been fitted with a hearing aid or they start putting some other practices into their lives so that they can hear better?
Most of the time when people come back after their first fitting with hearing aids, they're more smiley. They feel like they're involved in the conversation. They know what their grandchildren were joking about when they were talking to them on the phone. They were able to hear that so-and-so was cheating when they were playing cards, and they didn't hear that gossip, a little tidbit of gossip from the table behind them. So they feel like they're just more involved in things. I had one patient who had said that his grandchildren had given him a wind chime for Christmas, and he didn't think the wind chime was working. And he put these hearing aids on, and he came back with a smile from ear to ear, and he said, "I can't believe the wind chime actually works." It was just like the little things that you notice. As I said before, you don't necessarily know what you don't hear until you put something on and go, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know that my blinker was so loud. I didn't know that my shoes made noise." Things that we take for granted if your hearing is normal. So it's just that kind of slip back into normalcy, whether you are included in things.
Can we go back to pricing a little bit? If people are upgrading or changing every 4 to 6 years, there must be a repository someplace for old hearing aids.
You absolutely can donate them.
Now, is there any commercial outlet that's got older hearing aids, particularly when you're paying $5,000 for a hearing aid? It's in your ear. It's probably not going to get a lot of abuse. It probably still works perfectly. Is there some used, kind of like a used car lot for hearing aids?
I do know that there are practices, and I have to actually do a little bit more research on how I can put this into my practice. Some people are taking them as almost like a buyback.
Yes.
Or like a trade-in. The problem that we have is, as you said, they are sitting in your ear. So I can't turn around and take that hearing aid and pop it in somebody else's ear. So there has to be a way for it to be kind of cleaned up and make sure that the circuits are working the way they're supposed to. So what I've done in the past is if I have a patient, either they would keep if they're getting a new pair, they can either keep their older pair as a backup in case the other pair has to go in for service and they don't want to be without devices. Or the other thing they can do is we can donate it, and that way the donation goes into to people who can't afford them. And then the manufacturers take care of that. They refurbish the device, and that way it's given to patients who can't afford anything.
Oh, that's excellent. Another break for us right now. You're listening to the Boomer Buzz on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. And our guest today is Dr. Jennifer Ledbetter, talking about hearing loss in the boomer population. Dr. Ledbetter, there are certain professions that might have more issues with hearing loss than others. Are there certain professions that you've seen more of in your practice?
Anything, especially that's got any kind of noise exposure. So construction workers, as we talked before, landscapers, anyone that's in the military, anyone that's involved in music. So we can have musicians that listen to loud music all the time that gets blasted in their earplugs. So things like police officers, fire department.
I think you mentioned military also, didn't you?
Yeah. The military is a big force of noise exposure.
Okay, thank you. Any parting words for us on caring for our hearing?
I would definitely be aware of your surroundings. If you are going to be in a situation where you feel like your hearing may be impacted, put a pair of earplugs in your pocket, in your car. If you're going to a wedding, any kind of reception, any kind of fireworks, anything that's loud, try to preserve your hearing, because once you lose it, you're not going to get it back. And even hearing aids will bring your hearing closer to normal, but they're not regular ears. So we want to preserve what we have and keep it's a good advice, just really once a year have your hearing checked. It's good to have a baseline because that way we can measure changes. But just be aware of your surroundings.
Okay, good. Thank you.
I was going to ask you a question. My friend and I are going to do some target shooting.
Okay.
What kind of protection? You can get those red foam ear plugs that you actually roll up and then stick in your ears. Then you stick a headset over top of that. Is there something that you would suggest to really kind of nullify the sharp noise that you get in target shooting?
They actually, there are manufacturers that make ear protection specific for situations. So you want to be able to hear the deer walking up next to you, but you don't want to hear the rifle go off. So they'll have filters that are built into them so that they hear that sound and will protect your ears while still giving you a natural sound. Same type of a thing with musicians. You want to put an earplug in, you can definitely do the phone plugs and the earphones over the top. By doing a custom pair of earplugs, it's going to fit your ear more comfortably, and you can kind of pick which filter is best for the situation you're going to be wearing them for.
Can you suggest any manufacturers that do that?
The manufacturer that I work with most often is called Westone, and Westone has a whole array of different ear protections for different occupations.
How do you spell that?
So Westone.
Okay, thank you.
So I do a lot of my musicians' plugs from there. I have a dentist that doesn't like the sounds of the drill, so he's got a set of earplugs.
I wish I had known some of this before I went to rock concerts when I was much younger.
Yep, I have patients, same thing, that they'll wear, they just, anything. I have patients that are just sensitive to sound, sensitive to loud sound. They're going to go to a wedding. They're going to go to a bar mitzvah. Those are loud. Mm-hmm. So they'll actually have concerts, anything. So they'll have a custom-made earplugs so that they have them and they put them in their ears, and they're very easy. You just wash them off in soapy water and you can go on. But it's definitely something that you want to invest in, especially if you have that sensitivity to noise or you have a loud lifestyle.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Ledbetter. This has been very informative. I'd like to ask you how our listeners can contact you if they'd like to know more.
Sure. They can either call me by phone. My office, again, is in Bellmore, and the direct phone number is 516-409-4327. I have a website, which is www.ledbetteraudiology.com, and they can pop in and see me anytime they need to.
Now, are your services covered by Medicare?
Medicare will cover a hearing test as long as it's recommended by a primary doctor. Any of the other insurances don't necessarily require a referral, so it's good to come in and get your hearing checked.
Excellent. Okay. We want to thank you, Dr. Ledbetter, for joining us today. Your practice is located in Bellmore, New York, and we just really appreciate all the information you've given to our listeners today.
No, thank you for giving me the opportunity.
A lot to think about.
Okay. I'm Dr. Lamar Stanford, along with my wife, Patricia Stanford. This show will be available as a podcast on iTunes, Android Podcasts, Spotify, and Speaker.com. If you have any comments, email them to us anytime at whpc@ncc.edu. Thank you for listening to the Boomer Buzz here on the Voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Expressed on air are not necessarily those of WHPC, its management, or Nassau Community College. Responsible opposing viewpoints will be considered by emailing them to whpc@ncc.edu or by mail at WHPC 1 Education Drive, Garden City, New York 11530. Thanks for listening to the Voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
This show is brought to you by the Paramount in Huntington, who welcomes Ace Frehley, original lead guitarist of KISS, on Tuesday, July 2nd. More information is available online at ParamountNY.com.